Let's
Amazing.
do
All
it.
right. It looks like we can get started now.
Mhm.
I know you have both have a lot of content you want to go through today, so I will not keep you here for so much longer. I just want to start by the quick giveaway announcement. So all of you lovely registrants have been entered into a daily draw for our limited edition bucket list pickleball set. We heard it's a hot sport right now, and I'm actually trying to get into it. I'm very terrible. But anyways, Ben, congratulations. I hope you enjoy your new pickleball set. If you're in the chat, give me a shout, but otherwise, I will email you after the event today. Yay! And I also wanted to give a quick shout out to our incredible event partners. Without your support, could not put this event together. And so just really appreciate how you've collaborated with me on this and how passionate you are about elevating people and building great culture. Quick housekeeping items. Because we are hosting this on Zoom events, please make sure to keep the lobby link on hand so that you can flip between session to session relatively easily. Drop any comments you'd like in the chat box feature. We'd love to chat. If you want a comment to be seen by everyone, make sure the blue drop down is set to everyone. Q&A submission box is open. We will be running a few polls throughout, so stay tuned for that. The professional development credits will be shared at the end of each session. And last but not least, with the recordings, we are recording everything and we will be putting it all together onto a resource hub. Some speakers also want to share their slides, so we'll just compile all of that and send it out next week. All right, I will just do a quick setting of the stage for our next topic here. After hearing from Sarah about why every moment of recognition counts, we wanted to dig a little bit into the science behind it. We've already seen how powerful recognition can feel in real time, and so now let's talk about the data and the psychology to explain why it works. So, welcome to session two, Recognition Science, what the data tells us about engagement, burnout, and turnover intent. We're joined today by Charlene and Yannick, and I know you both have some fresh insights, hard off the press, and hard data to this conversation. And so I will let the two of you introduce a bit more about yourselves, what you do, the perspective you're coming to this conversation with. And maybe super briefly, because I know, Charlene, you also have included a slide as well on your section. So feel free to share whatever you feel makes sense during this quick intro time.
Awesome. I'll just share quickly who I am and then I'll let the slides speak for themselves when I get there. So yeah, so I'm Charlene. I have 20 years experience in HR and business operations. I've worked across industries, mainly working in tech, high tech, early stage startups. I worked in the VC world for a while and I've been doing that for the last 15 years. I do work on my own as a fractional HR rep. So I work with lots of different clients. I get to see even more about what companies are up to. And then I also head up community and partnerships with Tech and People Network, which is a nonprofit HR association supporting those folks working in Canadian tech companies. So I see we got a lot of US folks here today, and my data definitely speaks to both across North America, but any US folks working in tech, that's what Tech and People Network helps support. And Bucket List Rewards is a member of Tech and People Network.
Thank you, Charlene. Yannick.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlene. So, hi, everyone. My name is Yannick, and I am an IO psychology advisor and consultant at Bucket List. So, IO psychology, what it is really the psychology of work and how to make, just work better for employees, how to increase productivity, and so on. And really with occupational health and safety lens and statistics lens. So, I do love to measure things and, drive impact in many different ways. So I'm also a PhD candidate in IO psychology as well. And at Bucket List, what I mainly do is I work with customers to figure out if their recognition program is working, is it effective, and how it can be improved. And I have a lot of cool data to share today with you, so I'm really excited to talk more about it.
Awesome. Rebecca, should we jump right into slides?
Yes, I thought because we are doing this
Okay.
session a little bit differently, I will talk a bit about the format. So
Great.
hopefully it aligns us all. So we wanted to split this presentation into two parts. The first part, led by Charlene, will talk about engagement, burnout, and turnover in 2025. And then Yannick will take part two and talk about what science says about the impact of recognition and why it works. And so I believe you both are starting with a bit of a presentation with some of the data and the concept and trends that you're seeing. And at the end of each of your sessions, you want to do a quick group reflection and allow some time for a Q&A. And so folks listening in today, if you have any questions throughout their presentations, or if it's just related to the topic, we'd love for you to pop those into the chat or into the Q&A box so that we can address them during the time that we've allocated. Awesome. So Charlene, I will now stop my screen share and I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. Okay, share. Okay, all right. And then slideshow, let's see what happens here. Okay, great, awesome. Perfect. So yeah, engagement, burnout, and turnover in 2024. So as I mentioned, Tech and People Network, that's kind of where the lens is. A big part of our value proposition is providing data. So we do lots of data gathering from different sources. Every year we put out a salary survey in partnership with Mercer about kind of what's going along in regards to total rewards from that Canadian data lens. And we have a lot of other benefits membership that I'll share the slide deck. You can have a peek and see if you want to explore more about membership. So what is the data telling us? So we're talking about recognition and burnout, and I'm going to let Yannick get to the fun part of like all the solutions and science of recognition. I'm going to give us a little bit more depth of the problem statement. And I have to admit, when I first started going down this rabbit hole and when I first saw the salary survey from Tech and People Network, I actually wasn't fully aware of this problem myself. So I'm curious if other people maybe have similar insights and aha moments. But what is the data telling us about burnover, turnover, all of the things going on inside our organizations? So let's start with the macro trends of what's going on in the world, because that influences everything. So, not surprisingly, economic uncertainty continues despite cooling inflation. So both the Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve dropped the interest rates by 0.25 points recently. However, despite this indicating that inflation is cooling from those highs that we had just a few years ago, the overall cost of living continues to rise. So inflation and wages and stuff are an issue. Housing and food across North America continues to beat the inflation trend and really drive up the cost of living. So our folks are having a harder time paying their bills despite overall calming of larger economic circumstances, and the stock market seems to be kind of going up, but none of this is really matching what people are feeling on the ground in their day-to-day. And tariffs are a big thing across North America, and they're starting to be felt. I noticed grocery prices finally went up after everyone was kind of talking about it. They've definitely been felt by businesses, and there's still that kind of question mark of to what extent will the tariffs be felt on either side of the border. Job growth is slowing and unemployment rate is up across industries. So Canada actually hit its highest unemployment rate since March 2021, which was 1 year after COVID, and is now sitting at 7.1%. And the US has increased up to 4.3%. So both countries are ticking along of unemployment slowly going up. Obviously, that's across sectors. We see higher turnover and higher unemployment potentially in retail or part-time jobs. So that number is in there, but the overall trend that unemployment and the overall trend that our folks are seeing and the media headlines are showing are saying that it is going up, and it's consistently going up. It's just ticking along there. Political tensions and uncertainty on impact for both sides of the border continue. It's flooding my news feed here, and I follow North American wide news, so that is definitely playing into people's fears and companies' uncertainty in general. And then there's a really big concern around AI. So there are initial reports out now of how AI has been impacting. We've hit that kind of mass comfort and mass adoption at a low level. It hasn't hit its potential, but we're starting to see initial headlines in the media as well as reports, and there continues to be speculation of what AI will do to the future work. So, Google AI replacing jobs, and you're going to get companies reporting that tech updates or AI specifically has impacted jobs, and it's stated to continue. So we saw, I think it was Amazon and Salesforce, they openly said, we've replaced jobs with AI. We've cut hiring, we've frozen hiring because we are doing more with AI. Overall, the last 3 years, there has been a 13% decrease in jobs, particularly between the 20 to 25 or 22 to 25-year-olds in what they call the most AI exposed jobs. So people working in admin, software development, customer success, accounting, those entry-level positions are the ones that have already been impacted by AI. We know that there are less jobs in those entry-level positions, and those are pretty good jobs. Like typically, being an accountant, being a software developer, those were good careers to kind of enter into. And we're really seeing the younger generation, the new grads, having a hard time getting the job market in general, and AI is absolutely playing a factor in that. And then there's still studies out there that are suggesting by 2030 up to 30% of jobs to be replaced by AI, so completely replaced, and another 60% to be impacted. So that's pretty scary if you're just following the trend lines and you're feeling a little bit uncertain. And on the flip side, in our organizations, we're dealing with all of this as well. Our organizations are definitely being impacted by these macro trends. And also, this is basically what 2020 to 2025 looks like. And I have been using this slide for 5 years straight now. I just kind of add to it every so often, but we've gone through a lot. So I always like to take a moment as HR professionals and just notice that you are seen, and if you are feeling it, I joke that my knee is going to fall off from all the jerking it's done in the last 5 years, but this is what we've gone through. It's not really slowing down. Like I said, things are still continuing on. So just a little bit of a moment for yourself for some compassion and empathy, as well as it is a macro trend. There is a lot happening in the world. So interestingly, around all of this, volunteer turnover is dropping. So people aren't quitting their jobs. So it's been a steady decline since 2022, which was the Great Resignation. That was extremely felt in tech specifically, but it was generally a shift of, the economy kind of opened up, COVID settled out into this new normal, and people were leaving their jobs left, right, and center. The economy was booming because of COVID, post-COVID in some industries, and people are just making a change for change's sake. It was that kind of impact of all the things that were going on. And it's been steadily declining since. There's a bunch of different reports and surveys out there, but a Mercer report said that the US dropped from 17% to 13% of voluntary turnover. In Canada, we saw an overall drop to 10% of volunteer turnover over the last year. The pay scale survey, which they do every year, and it kind of covers all of North America, again, across industries, saw a steady decrease from 26% to down to 13%. And then in tech, which is the industry I'm in, which felt the Great Resignation and then felt the cost cutting afterwards, we've also seen voluntary turnover drop. So this graph here is by industry, by sector. So it takes out things like tech and manufacturing, tech and kind of software and Facebook type tech, as well as agriculture, clean tech, that sort of thing. Video gaming's also in this. So you can see some of those industries had turnover rates as high as almost 25% in 2022, and they're sitting on average of about 8%. Awesome. So at the end of the day, our employees are burnt out, and it's absolutely real. So interestingly, back in 2019, so before COVID and all of the world changing, the World Health Organization officially added burnout to the ICD-11, which is kind of their index, kind of like the DSM-5, but specifically around impacts of human impacts on health and well-being. So it's a little bit less about disease and more just other factors. But they officially added burnout as an occupational phenomenon and a factor influencing health status and why people seek care. So this was back in 2019. And in 2025, if lots of surveys, lots of data out there, it's on the rise. And stats are consistently reporting above 50% and as high as 69% that employees are stating they are experiencing burnout. And the cycle of burnout generally looks like exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced efficiency. And burnout equals disengagement. So what's causing it? Obviously, all the things that we talked about, but the World Health Organization's definition of burnout is chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. Now, interestingly, they noted again in 2019 that it was specifically linked to workplace stress. So in theory, if your job was really stressful and the organization was going through things, but your life was good, you shouldn't be experiencing burnout. However, I would argue that all of those macro factors, that they don't live in a box. Like, we don't really separate our work and life the same way. And our organizations are feeling this stress. Our leadership is feeling this stress. Me working with smaller companies, with startups and growing companies and founder-led companies, which, doesn't stop just because the employee count is higher. These folks, these humans, are taking all of that macro level stress, and that stress is coming into our organization. So I would say, given everything from 20 to 2025 and the state of the world today, there isn't that separation. And we're really feeling it. And our organizations are stressed out, our leaders are stressed out, and it's stressing out our workers. The higher workload, job scope creep, constantly do more with less mentality is stressing people out. Change fatigue. If our leaders could just pick whether we're work from home, we're remote, or we're hybrid, we could all, get on with our day, but it's constantly changing. Everything is changing so fast. We're burnt out. That change fatigue is really real. Obviously, economic uncertainty absolutely impacts organizations. Cost cutting is happening. We had, headlines a few years ago in tech around the great bloodbath. These are real things that are absolutely affecting things. Lack of perceived growth and advancement in roles. So companies are, leveling off. People are feeling stagnant, and they're not sure where their careers grow. Stabilizing wages, but cost of living increase. With inflation going down, we are seeing wages stabilize. We're seeing an average of 3.5% across tech, which used to be like the highest wages. We'd see like 8, 9% sometimes. We're seeing 3.5, and the consumer pricing index is sitting around 2.83%. So even tech, our wages aren't really that much higher than other industries. And we're seeing it being consistent 2-3 years in a row now. People are budgeting correctly, and they're awarding just those kind of basic increases. And meanwhile, the cost of living continues to go up. And lack of recognition. It's absolutely a reason of burnout. And you're all in the right place to hear a little bit more about that. So what we've seen with this is we've seen a real shift from the quiet quitting that we had happening during COVID to a phenomenon called job hugging. So both stem from burnout and result in disengagement, but they're fundamentally different in a couple ways. So quiet quitting is that idea of, I'll do my job, but I won't kill myself for the company that doesn't value me. We saw a lot of that during COVID. They're checked out because the work feels meaningless and overwhelming. They're reduced emotional investment, quietly disengaged, but they're still meeting baseline expectations. And it obviously correlates with low engagement, high stress, lack of recognition, or unclear growth. That was kind of what was driving the quiet quitting, why people were quiet quitting. And it really signals potential turnover, because this quiet quitting phenomenon was back when there was lots of jobs available. So people were hopping around. And if you have those quiet quitters, they may leave when the right opportunity appears, which kind of led to the Great Resignation. That was all that quiet quitting era. But now what we're seeing is job hugging. So I want to leave, but the world's a mess. I'm scared, and it's safer to stay. So it's really driven by fear or practicality, right? You got to pay your bills. You need a paycheck. It's really scary how much everything's costing nowadays. I'm just going to stay, to be practical. And it's really hidden disengagement. So it's burnout, it's disengagement, and resentment builds quietly. There's a lack of perceived ability to make change. We know that humans don't do well when we don't have control. We're not good at that. So this idea that I want to move, I'm unhappy, and I don't see the light in a tunnel. I can't just make a change. It really breeds a different kind of resentment and disengagement versus the quiet quitting, where they just weren't really putting anything extra into things. And the biggest thing is it delays turnover. So there's a risk that there's going to be a turnover wave when the market improves, which is interestingly, I think I lost my slide. Oh no. Oh no, sorry, I did talk about that. So that slide about turnover, we often think that no turnover is great, especially in HR, right? That's often a KPI of like, reduce the turnover. But all to say, this lack of turnover isn't necessarily coming from workplaces being better and people being happier. It's coming from a fact that they're afraid. And the scary part for organizations is right now everything's good. Your workers aren't leaving. They're not necessarily engaged. They're not really that productive, but you got some warm bodies in the seat. And the issue is when the market improves, which it always does, there's potential for real mass turnover. So what is it that employees want? Well, this survey was done back in 2020 with Mercer. They do a Inside the Employee's Mind study every year. It covers different topics. But really, 2020 to 2025 was the biggest workplace disruption in a generation, and it really continues. So not long ago, the mentality was work hard now, gain resources, and attain a well-being in the future. If you work hard now, you'll have this great life. If you work hard now, you'll retire really happy. Maybe you get to retire early. And that's really shifted. And that was really triggered by COVID. And now the younger generation and all generations in the workplace are much more prioritizing well-being now. It's like, I got to live my life now. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. And the way the world's going, or it feels like it's going, that sentiment is very much still the case. And we're seeing that younger generation specifically really embrace that. And they really want to work in a way that works for me. So this idea that you get to tell people what they can do at work, that there's a boss, that you're employed, that your benefit is the paycheck I'm giving you, that mentality is gone. They're demanding that work is done in a way that works for them and supports their life that they want to live now. And that's a really big shift. And it can be a really big shift depending on the generation of the leadership, depending on the industry. It's causing a lot of friction and has been continuously since about 2022. They told us they wanted these things, but we kind of saw some of these things creep out quickly after COVID. So what employees want, they want cash is still king for attraction retention. There's lots of data to say that people are still leaving jobs and staying in jobs for the pay. I mean, they got to pay their bills. But they also want control and flexibility. So autonomy over time, location, a workload that fits in their life and not the other way around. They want clarity and support, clear roles, priorities, and managers who help set boundaries and remove obstacles. They want that clarity and support in their role instead of just feeling like they're drowning. And that's that concept of, people leave bad managers. Recognition and fairness. They want to feel valued. They want meaningful feedback, fair pay, career growth opportunities, feel like they're showing up for a reason. And then overall well-being and psychological safety. So a culture that promotes mental health, rest, and realistic expectations. There's lots of data around, the value of time off, the value of hybrid work and that sort of thing. It really does make an impact on people hitting that work-life balance and that slide that we saw that they're looking for. And then connection and purpose. So a sense of belonging, inclusion, meaningful impact on their work, which honestly, that last point, anyone who's done an employee engagement survey in the last 20 years has had those questions. That still remains a very good indicator that people are doing well and feeling good or not in their organization. So what can we do? This is a lot of doom and gloom and a lot about the problem, but we need to create engaged workplaces and we need to reduce the risk for mass exit. If that is your business case for the work that needs to be done, you are running the risk of a mass exit if you have quiet quitting and job hugging happening in your workplace. And if you don't know, then you need to start and check in and find out what's going on in your organization. So what can we do? We need to ensure offerings are competitive to industry and meet our employees' needs. And this can look different, depending on industry and what you can offer in regards to your total rewards. But just remember, pay transparency is making it easier for employees to evaluate, and pay transparency where companies are required to put the pay level on job postings. Right now, it's just limited to job postings, is increasing across North America. Provinces and states are adding to it. So just know that, they can see what other people are making. And now with remote work, depending on your industry, just because you're in a state or a province that doesn't have pay transparency, they can see what you would make working for a company based out of a place that does have pay transparency. So just making sure you have your house in order in regards to that. Just being aware of the macro pressures, that low turnover isn't positive necessarily. It could be a canary in the coal mine, and really staying attuned to your employees. What's actually happening in your workplace? What is your culture? What's really going on there? Take stock of the culture. What's working, and what are some of the current realities that may need to be addressed? Be mindful of that change fatigue and ensure good change management. Change is inevitable a lot of the times, but taking that step to make sure there's good change management in place when change does happen. Can you adjust policies, process, or create people programs to facilitate a culture that prevents burnout, which this conference is a lot about that. So that's a great first step. And creating opportunities for connection. So particular if you're in a remote or hybrid work environment, making sure you're looking at that through the lens of how do we create those opportunities for connection and that meaningful connection to the work and to each other. Awesome. I think I saw someone raise their hand, Rebecca. I'm not sure. that's kind of the end of my present all the facts to you. What's going on? What is the world telling us? What is the data telling us? I have two poll questions, and then I'm happy to, 5 minutes or so on other questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Charlene. Lots of great information. And for those of you, I did see a few hands raising and dropping. So if you had a question, maybe pop in the chat and we can read it out and talk about it there. I will launch your poll now, Charlene.
Yeah. And maybe while the poll is launching, I can navigate a few of the questions on the chat. So Lauren just asked, what's a reliable source for viewing unemployment and cost of living statistics? So I think in Canada, it's Stats Canada, and in the US, it's the Federal Bureau of, oh my goodness, I can't remember. It's one of the sources I used. Whatever's equivalent to like your Stats Canada. Sorry, I should know that I looked at the website for my presentation. But the bottom line is there's government websites that have this information. And then the other thing is there's lots of reports. So companies like Mercer, which is a very credible data collection company, does surveys. So if you Google or AI it, just look at the resources. There's lots of stuff out there, and I definitely pulled from lots of resources in preparing this presentation, and just kind of found that consistency. Same with cost of living increase. There's government tracking of that. We have it here in Canada, as well as the Consumer Pricing Index is a North American wide thing. So there's very, very good, credible places to find that information to track. And if you're looking at salaries and cost of living and what industry is doing, there's lots of great salary surveys available out there that, again, are done through really reputable service providers like Mercer, like Radford's another big one. There's lots of ones that are industry specific. So there's lots of great data available. Some of it's a little bit more costly, but might be worth investing in, and others are kind of free, and just kind of make sure you're always checking the sources. And if you're using ChatGPT, you're just making it give you the source, and you double check that the numbers are correct.
Well, thanks, Charlene. I'm always looking for new sources of data that are very credible. So I appreciate this list that you just gave us.
Yeah.
And chat, Francesca and Brandy just shared that it's probably the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yeah. So what's the biggest factor driving burnout? We've got the poll here. So excessive workload. So people are really feeling that. And then stagnant wages versus cost of living, perceived lack of purpose or growth opportunities, lack of flexibility, a little bit on the lower side. So hopefully that means your organizations are all offering flexibility. Such an easy win in a lot of ways. And then leadership culture. Yeah, I saw a couple people comment that that's really hard if you've got that multiple generations in the workplace, and that buy-in, and even working with younger generations. I don't know what's young generation anymore. I just feel like I keep getting older. But that founder mentality, founders are so passionate about what they're building. It's their baby, that they sometimes, even if they're on the younger generation, they have a hard time understanding their employees aren't necessarily sharing that same level of passion, and that they're not willing to kind of go above and beyond to the same extent they are. It's something I deal with working in that industry. Yeah, perfect. I don't think I see any other questions, and I'm eager to. Yeah. Oh yeah, I had one more. I had one more poll. That's right. So here's kind of what's going on here in regards to why you think burnout's either happening or there's risk of burning out for everyone to be kind of mindful of, and then what is your organization currently doing or considering doing to address burnout. So see flexibility, great. Recognition engagement programs makes sense. That's probably why you're here today. Mental health and wellness support. This one was really interesting. Mental health and wellness support spiked in COVID of what companies were offering. We have data around kind of what people are doing in that health and wellness space as well. And it really spiked of like mental health support and training managers on mental health. Interestingly, it's been really declining. It's been like deprioritized by companies as a thing steadily since 2020, which I think is really interesting. And it's such an easy way to make sure we're managing burnout, not just for our staff, but also for us as like the caregivers and managers that have to sometimes take on that extra people layer that can be really challenging for ourselves. Manager training, leadership, addressing workload clarity. Yep. And nothing formal yet. So 27%, nothing formal yet to address burnout. So hopefully seeing that the numbers are real, and seeing that there's real business risk there to burnout and the consequences of it, maybe that kind of starts those conversations.
Amazing. Thanks, Charlene. I think I see a few questions in the chat here. So I
Sure.
believe so this question is from Connie. What's your context on unprecedented growth? I believe that was something you mentioned in one of your slides. So would love to hear a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's specifically in tech, we experienced a real boom, and tech seems to trickle out. And what is tech nowadays, right? Every company is a tech company technically. So basically during COVID, what happened was everyone stayed home, everyone had more money to spend because they weren't spending money on vacations and stuff like that. So while some industries absolutely were impacted, travel, tourism, all that kind of stuff, industries like tech and specifically e-commerce went through the roof. People weren't going to malls anymore. They were shopping online like crazy because that's all they could do. And they were spending their excessive income. A lot of people didn't lose their jobs during COVID. Again, there are certain industries that were really hit, but overall, as a whole, we kind of adapted. Everyone started working from home, and there was a lot of industries, particularly, like I said, in tech, that really experienced a boom during COVID. And then what happened was everyone's shopping online, everyone's spending their money. They have money to spend because they're, staying home, they're not dining out as often. So they have this discretionary income that they're spending by shopping. The e-commerce industry booms. Every company selling a tool that supports e-commerce is now booming because their customers are needing more because they're scaling and growing. They're hiring like crazy. We were adding jobs in the tech sector left, right, and center. And then essentially there was a bit of a crash. And part of that is because the world went back to normal. And the way it works in tech specifically, and much like other industries, is you have to hire ahead of the curve. So if you experience 100% growth with your employees, you're now setting your sales targets, you're now setting your revenue targets as if that's going to continue. And really, you have no information to say that it's not. And even if it isn't going to continue, you still want to make hay while the sun shines. So now you need to start hiring more software developers to get your product out there. You need to start hiring more customer success people to deal with the customers. Like it's just, you're growing, 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 and you're growing slightly ahead of the reality, and you're growing in that speculation and projections of growth to be able to handle the growth and scale. And if you're VC backed, that gets even more complicated. And then basically when the world kind of started getting back to normal, people started traveling again, things started opening up, those kind of inflated industries crashed. And we saw it with e-commerce. And that's why you'll see those headlines around Shopify, even Facebook, and we saw the tech bloodbath shortly after. And it was just in a response that of all these jobs that they grew and hyperinflated got cut because that bubble kind of burst. So the tech bloodbath sounded really terrible, but in fact, it actually was, there was still a net positive of jobs that were created versus the jobs that were cut. So that was kind of that unprecedented growth that we felt explicitly in the tech industry, but it does tend to fill out. And the economy was doing really well. Like anyone who was invested in the stock market, our stuff did really well for a few years there. And then it kind of leveled off. Same with inflation, increasing interest rates and that kind of stuff. So there was a little bit of a boom for a lot of people in a lot of industries that weren't directly impacted by COVID. I hope that answered the question. Went on a little bit of a rant there. I live in this world.
No, that's great. To cap off this section and ease our way into Yannick's, let's talk about Crystal's comment that she just left. It's kind of related back to when we were talking about leaders, and so the topic here is around collaboration and continual growth. And so, Charlene, is there anything you want to comment on here before we pass off things to Yannick?
Yeah, for sure. I think we always should be growing our employees. Stagnation and even, during a time when the turnover rate was higher, people were leaving because of lack of perceived growth. Overall, if you work in a knowledge industry, people are there for growth. Those are really important intrinsic motivators to people, especially in more knowledge-based industries. So if you're not growing, if you're not investing in the growth of your people and allowing them to grow while they're still in your company, they will leave your company to grow somewhere else. So Crystal, absolutely. When you say it's safe to say that like any leader, like any relationship, leaders need to have good collaboration, need to have good communication, and need to grow their people 100%. And that is from leaders down to managers to other places. And then the other thing I would just say to kind of add AI onto it, because again, that's the world that I'm drinking from the fire hose of, so to speak, is making sure people are being trained on AI. So which can maybe alleviate some of those fears that if you're embracing AI as an organization, one, you need people to run the robot, so to speak. So making sure that you're giving those people the skills to do that, and maybe you can kind of evolve people's jobs as opposed to replacing people's jobs as well, which will just allow for more stability. And also, you always win when you grow your own talent. That institutional knowledge, that cultural fit that was already there, if you can cultivate that and just give them a new skill set all day long, that's the best retention growth strategy of any company. Hard to do, but the best one to aim towards.
Completely agree. Thank you, Charlene. All right, Yannick, now we'll hand it over to you and transition.
Perfect. Yeah, and also really like that question, Crystal, as well, because you can always learn something, and especially from younger employees as well, as especially if you've been along for a while. So being aware of what your employees actually want is like an important skill when it comes to being a leader. So that definitely helps. It's just something I wanted to add because that's definitely true. All right, so I'll share my screen. All right, you can all see my slides. Chat.
Yes, sorry if we can see it.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so I'll change a bit the topic. I think Charlene did an amazing job in explaining, what a lot of the issues are at the moment. And I especially like the voluntary turnover issue where people just stay in their job, but they're not as productive as they should be. And I think, what I'm talking about is going to relate to that a little bit. So I'll discuss two different things. So I'm going to discuss the science of recognition at the beginning. So why recognition is important and why does it work and what the research says about it. And then I'll just explain a bit of theories to explain why they make sense. That a recognition program or getting recognized will actually have an impact on engagement, turnover intent, turnover and burnout, and things like that. Then the second aspect I'm going to show is actual data that we collected recently with our own customers at Bucket List. Because over the research, we wanted to know, how effective is recognition? How effective is the quality of the recognition that you're giving? And that's something that we got a lot from our customers as well, is that it's all nice and everything that we hear recognition is amazing, is all this, it works super well. But what about us? Is it going to work on our employees? So that's kind of the target that we set ourselves for in the past few months. And that's the data also going to be presenting today. So if we move to the science of recognition, like an overview of what it says, basically it's clear. It works. Recognition is amazing. It increases employee engagement. It increases satisfaction. It reduces burnout and it reduces turnover as well. Mainly because, when you get recognized, you feel valued, it impacts belonging, and it just motivates people. It also protects against burnout because when you get recognized, and I'll go a bit later into that in this presentation, but it buffers the effect of strain and burnout on you as an individual because it feels good to be recognized. And it reduces turnover, but also turnover intent. And what I mean by turnover intent is thinking about leaving. So even if turnover has reduced or is lower, if employees still think about leaving the organization, that's going to impact their work. That's the impact what they do. It's going to impact how they feel. It also might impact others, and it will have, an impact on the whole culture. So it's really important to be able to identify that and address it. And how do we do so that employees are engaged, they think less about leaving, and they avoid getting more strained or burnt out. So the bottom line of it all is like recognition often seem like a perk, a nice to have. Oh, it's good if we have it. But the reality of it is that it's a proven driver of performance and retention, and also a reductor in burnout. And I'll explain to you why. So if you go into the behavioral science of why recognition works at its core, I have three main reasons here. And the first one is its impact on psychological needs. So in other words, when you get recognized, it meets your need for belonging and self-esteem. Has it ever happened to you that you got recognized and you just feel part of the group because of it, or it made you feel good when you got recognized? So recognition is really effective, in targeting those needs, making you feel good and making you feel part of the group. And that will have an influence on your mood, of how you feel about your coworkers, and so on. So once your needs are met, you can also, strive towards greater goals and greater needs at the end of the day. The second one is it builds intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is you do something because you want to, because you like it, because you're interested in doing it. And individuals are way more likely to work hard or be motivated for and to work for a company that values them than a company that does not values them. And there's three main things that impacts, the intrinsic motivation. So one of them is called relatedness. So do you relate to the people you work with? And when you get recognized, like I said, it impacts your belonging in a specific way, and you feel better about yourself in a lot of ways, and you feel part of the group. So you develop relationship with the people you work with, and that makes you more motivated to just work towards a common goal. The second one is the autonomy. Let's say that you work on something and you work really hard on it and you created your own ideas, you had your own plan in doing, and then you get recognized for it. It boosted your autonomy that you actually can do something and you're the one who created it. You had autonomy over the work that you did, and getting recognized for that has a huge impact on you as an individual. And the final one, and I think is the most important, is the sense of competence. If someone recognizes you, you feel competent about the work that you do. And that's a must. Like no one wants to do something and being told that they're not good at it or they struggle or they're bad and so on. If you work really hard for something and you hear that you did a good job, then you feel competent about yourself. And that helps really to drive intrinsic motivation at the end of the day. And the last one is that recognition does feel good. Did it ever happen that you got recognized and you said, "Oh yeah, I didn't like that recognition. It kind of didn't feel good," or something like that? I mean, it could happen if it feels fake and something like that, but if the recognition is done in a good way, it feels good. And the neuroscience behind it, what it proves is that it triggers dopamine in the brain. So it sparks positive emotion like satisfaction and enjoyment, and that boosts engagement. So recognition on that end is really powerful. But now if you want to drive more into how that works, what's the process behind it? There's a really good model that was grounded in research that explained it really well, and it's called the job demands resource model. So basically what it means is that it's a framework that explains how job demands can lead to burnout and how job resources can actually protect your own well-being, drive engagement, and boost performance. And what I mean by job demands is anything on the job that can be stressful, that can be a challenge, or that can be a barrier to complete your job successfully. So that could be a toxic boss. That could be you don't have the tools to do your job. That could even be you don't have a comfortable chair or the right equipment. You might be working with people that don't share the same goals or values. It could be a lot of different things. So anything uh, that can contribute to make your job harder. And on the other hand, job resources is anything that supports you, that makes your job, your life easier to complete your job successfully. And what recognition is a resources. Because when you get recognized, it puts you in a state where you can actually, that you feel supported way more. And that helps you to go through the struggles of work. Because there's always going to be demands on the works. There's no job where there's no stressors, where there's no challenge, where there's no demand. So it's important to have a good balance and have enough resources to be able to deal with those. So if I explain it a bit more with an example or I show you the model, that's a good way to kind of picture it. So if you see job resources or recognition has the job resources, you see it's directly related to work engagement. And the reason that is because when you get recognized, like I said, you feel competent, you feel good, you feel that, you've accomplished something. And that puts you in a positive mind of state, right? And that is then directly related to job performance. On the other hand, job demands does the opposite. If you have too many of them, then that will lead to strain and more burnout and so on. So I'll give an example to kind of show how that works. Let's say you work really, really hard to meet a deadline or to submit a report for a client or customers, or you work in healthcare and you worked overtime, to help with the diminution to combat not enough employees working on a specific night. If you work really hard and you get the recognition, someone tells you, "Thank you so much for being there, for being such amazing work," then how are you going to feel? You're going to feel way more competent, you're going to feel way more happier, more satisfied, and that is going to put you in a positive state where you'll be more engaged. And that's going to lead to higher performance, but also because you're more positive, because you're in a more positive state, that's going to lead to more proactive behaviors where you're thinking about, I did this and it was worth it. It was like I'll do it again because simply my coworkers appreciate it, my leader appreciate it. And then there's that cycle that builds itself. Because then, just that state of mind that you have acts as a job resource as well. So then there's that cycle that keeps happening, and there's a culture that develops each time there's recognition and there's support. There's that positive culture that develops, and if that happens across all employees, then that cycle will keep going, and you'll have a high performing culture that develops over time. On the other hand, if you don't get recognized for the hard work that you did and people doesn't say anything, you work super hard to meet a deliverable or to finish your job or what you had to do, and then no one even talks about it, no thank you or anything, how are you going to feel? You're probably going to ask yourself, why am I doing this job? Why am I here? And then you don't, you might want to quit, but you need the job, so you kind of stay in it. So then you go through self-undermining behavior, right? Like I said, why, like, should I do something else? And it becomes more kind of it doesn't feel good kind of a positive state of mind. And that leads to higher demand. So that's a higher stress that you have. You think about quitting even more. And that vicious cycle also builds up. And that leads over time to either you leaving, or if you really need the job, you have to stay, that's going to just lead to lower engagement and lower performance as a whole. So behind all of this, that's kind of the science of why recognition works and why it's important. So now I'm just gonna, now that we know a bit, we went through a bit of theory and so on, what does the data tell us, right, about it? Like, is it really working? And what we did at Bucket List recently is we surveyed our own customers and over 500 employees so that we could better understand how does getting recognized, the frequency of it, and the quality of the recognition that you're receiving, how does that impact engagement, turnover intent, or thinking about leaving, and burnout as a whole? So the first thing, like I said, that we looked at is the recognition frequency. So how often that you get recognized. And typically what we do when we do that, we ask people in the survey, the frequency they get recognized by their leaders and by their peers. And then we compare individuals who get recognized often, so monthly or more, multiple times a month, weekly and daily. And we compare them with individuals that rarely get recognized. So only once a year or yearly or a few times a year or to never. And then we look at their differences, how more engaged is one group compared to the other, how one group thinks about leaving more, and how burnt out or rust out the other group is compared to the other. So yeah, so before we move into it, I don't know, Becca, if we want to keep the poll question at the end, but I just wanted to ask to everyone, like, how often any of you get recognized, and just to get a better idea to how we're doing overall, people in this group. And you can also answer the second question, which is more related to the quality of the recognition that we're getting. So how often, that you get, yeah, so in your experience, what makes recognition feel most meaningful? Perfect. So I'll leave you time to answer, but we can review those at the end. And I'll go to the next slide. All right, so here's the impact of getting recognized with frequency. So that's what our data showed with customers at Bucket List. So we looked at individuals who got recognized more compared to individuals that did not get recognized as much. And what we found was pretty groundbreaking is that if you get recognized monthly or more, that improves engagement, it reduces turnover intent and burnout. And it's pretty drastic differences. So in terms of engagement, individuals who receive monthly recognition and more are 20% more engaged compared to individuals that do not get recognized frequently. And they have 26% lower turnover intent and 14% lower burnout. And that is massive because even if you think about quitting, remember here, that's not leaving yet. You're thinking about it. So that will have an influence on your productivity, on your level of engagement, and it shows that these individuals are actually more burnt out. So it does have an impact. And at the end of the day, these all have an economic cost on it, right? If you're more engaged, you'll be more productive, meaning you'll make more money for the organization you're working for. If you think about leaving and you leave, then your turnover number, meaning that you'll cost the company some money. And if you don't leave or you're kind of quiet hugging, then at this stage, or job hugging, then at this stage, you're not as productive perhaps as you should be. Meaning that over the long run, the company also will lose money. So that's a way to kind of quantify it as well in a way and show the ROI of recognition. The other thing that we looked at was the quality of the recognition that you get. So we have actually the number here. So a lot of us said that all of the above was a big one, personalized, authentic, and timely and fair was a bit less important here. But to have good recognition, you need the following. You want the recognition to be personalized, meaning that the recognition is delivered to you in a way that you like. A good example would be like, some people really like to get recognized publicly, whereas others like to get recognized privately. So if you recognize someone privately that prefers public recognition, then the impact wouldn't be as great. And it depends on the individual, so it's always important. It's a good thing to ask. Then, is it authentic? Is it genuine and sincere? Is it timely? Does it happen quickly? And finally, is it fair? Like if I do the same amount of work and I get recognition, would someone else also get the same recognition for the same amount of work or a similar type of work? And the data for it here was also pretty groundbreaking. So thank you for answering that question as well. But what we found is that if it's personalized, people are 23% more engaged if they receive recognition or they perceive that the recognition they're receiving is personalized. They're 40% less likely to think about leaving and 19% lower levels of burnout. And that's once again comparing individuals that receive recognition, that they agree that the recognition they're getting is personalized versus people who disagree that the recognition they're getting is personalized. And then if we move to the next slide, which is the impact of authentic, that's the one that had one of the biggest impact. So 72% higher engagement, 57% lower turnover intent, and 22% lower burnout. These are massive numbers. Like these has a huge impact on the business as a whole. And simply by recognizing employees and recognizing them well. That's the difference that you're getting. And then timeliness, also really important, 37% higher engagement, 15% lower turnover intent, and 20% lower burnout. Employees that got recognized quickly. And the reason why timely is also important is because if you don't get recognized quickly or right away, you might feel that you did not receive the recognition. So you might go into that vicious cycle where no one recognized me. Why? Like I did amazing work. I should have been recognized for the work that I did. And then you get recognized a month later, then it feels good, but you still threw in that process or negative process of thinking that people didn't value you over that period. So it's better to recognize later than never, but that's really something that's easy to do to recognize quickly. So that's a big way as well to improve your recognition program. If someone does a good job, just tell them right away. And finally is fairness of recognition. So is it fair? So if a recognition is not fair, then that's going to lead also to different problems. But if you perceive that recognition is fair, you have 30% higher engagement, 49% lower turnover intent, and 25% lower burnout. So that's what I had to show and discuss today. Do you have any questions? If you want to connect on LinkedIn, you can scan the QR code. Also, if you're curious about the ROI of your own recognition program, feel free to send me a message. I'll also be happy to talk about it and have a conversation if you're willing. And that's it. You have any questions for me?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Yannick. Right on time. We're about to a couple moments here to spare. I wanted to take a few moments, allow folks to give the feedback on the feedback doc, and also just really quickly, Charlene, give you a chance to talk as well about TAP and the work that y'all are doing here as we wrap up the session.
Yeah, I actually had a chance to introduce TAP at the beginning there. So, like I said, nonprofit HR association. If you're working in Canada's tech sector, one of our biggest value props is making sure you have data to make data-driven decisions. But we also have a really great community. We do conferences. So my contact information is there. If you're not already a member and you're joining us and have a Canadian presence, so if you're US but have some offices in Canada, would love to chat. And like I said, our salary survey just came out as well. So we have some fresh data hot off the presses to share.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I have been to a few of your conferences, very fun. So if anybody else is in the area, we'll see you there. Awesome. And then on bucket list end, I'm sure y'all know we are a rewards and recognition platform. We're really passionate about working with great workplaces who want to up their recognition game. So if it's something you're interested in, would love to be on your radar, and we'd love to schedule a chat and send you some swag. I'll also just leave the credits up here for a few moments. We have the HRCI, the SHRM, and the CPD, so feel free to note those down. I will just quickly take a look and see if there's any questions in the chat. I think we have actually a few comments. Actually, I think it's a great way for us to wrap up this segment as we head on into the next session. I know book recommendations are always a huge thing. So Crystal, thank you for sharing with everyone that 5 Language of Appreciation book as a fun resource. It's definitely one that I've seen as well and am in the process of reading. So highly recommend. We can all be book buddies and start our own book club. Jeff, yes, the SHRM code is the same as the first session. Amazing. Any last words, Yannick and Charlene, before you all hop off and join the next session here?
Yeah, just thank you for being here, for listening. I saw a comment here. Is this similar to Herzberg two-factor theory? Yes, it's part of it. So it built from it, right? So it started with Maslow, then it went to Herzberger two-factor theory, then it kind of moved to the self-determination theory and so on. And job demand resource model kind of links it up quite well. So yeah, so in terms of needs, yes, it would be, it's based on this. It was part of the foundation of to get where we are at the moment. Yes.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you both so much for your time. I know you're getting lots of kudos and shout outs in the chat. So thank you again. Information definitely resonating, and we'll see you next time.